Hey, thank you for being with us today. My name is Sébastien Dallaire, and I'll be kind of your host for this webinar, fairly short webinar. We'll keep this under half an hour. You have busy days, it's lunchtime. We want you to be able to go and do the things that you need to do on a daily basis. It's really my pleasure and say our pleasure, Susan and I, to have you on this call so we can present to you our new study, the Financial Compass that we have created to address some of the most important issues for people in the financial sector, but also for Canadians more broadly. And for this first webinar on the financial compass, we wanted to focus on what will be the most significant wealth transfer that we've ever seen in Canada. We're talking about over $1 trillion that not only will change hands, but it's already started. This is already underway. So what have we done with the financial compass? Let me give you a bit of a snapshot of what the study is before we talk about some of the results. We spoke to over 5,000, sorry, I can't even remember my own numbers, over 5,000 Canadians coast to coast to talk about their finances and about wealth management. We spoke about multi-generational finances, but also about intergenerational wealth transfer. That's really what we wanted to own in for this one. And what we learned generally, and we'll talk about this today and why it really matters to you on this call, is that a lot of the traditional needs or the lenses that we have used to study this need to be adapted to a new reality, like new economic reality, new social realities, and of course, the impact of new technology. You've been hearing this again and again and again for years, so I'm not really teaching you anything here. But we really want to focus on the key learnings, strategic questions for you working in the financial sector or for you making decisions about your own future, what we need to think about. And it's about being future proof. That's really what is important to us. To talk about the details of the research, and by the way, before I go and introduce Susan, I wanted to say at the end of this, I will present to you a lot more of the detail. What have we covered in the study? What are all the topics we're going to cover? And what else could you get as part of this research? So now, most important thing for today, introducing you to my colleague, Susan Sanei-Stamp, who leads our financial sector research team nationally. She's based in Toronto. I'm based in Montreal. We truly are a national team. And Susan brings with her more than 25 years of experience, both client side and supplier side. So she really has a fantastic understanding of the whole landscape from both sides of what we do on a daily basis. So Susan, very happy to have you with me today.
Thanks so much, Seb. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to walking everyone through these key learnings. And I'll just share real quick, kind of the impetus behind this particular program. And it really began with this core belief that all of us in the financial services sector, so be we researchers, marketers, product leaders, strategists, there is an opportunity, and I might go as far as saying an actual responsibility to be helping Canadians feel more secure, more supported during times of great transition. So that was really the driving force behind this program.
Thank you, Susan. And before I
Pardon
let
me.
you go into the details of the study, just want to take a step back and present a bit more of kind of an overview. None of us need to be mathematical geniuses to understand if we're talking about $1 trillion changing hands over about a decade. I could go to up to about $100 billion a year. And that's a lot of money. I don't need to tell you. Those are numbers that are really hard to wrap our heads around. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this is happening now. It's not just in the future. It's happening now, and it will continue for many years to come. We have a lot of people who do have extensive amounts of money, of wealth that they want to transfer to other people. What does it mean? What are the key moments for you? What do you need to do to really anticipate key moments for you to jump in, be part of that discussion, and not fall by the wayside? That's really important. So if we think and we look at the context in which this is happening, like none of this is happening in a vacuum. People giving money, receiving money, it's happening in a context that, for those of you who've known me, spoke to me over the past few years, it's not the first time you hear this. It's not a very positive, Canadians don't have a very positive view of the state of not just the country, but the economy right now. There are a lot of reasons for that. We've had a lot of global turbulence over the past few years. So Canadians don't really trust that the system itself is very safe and stable right now. So that's very important to understand. At the same time, when we compare, 31% say I'm confident about Canada's economy, almost 6 in 10 say I'm confident about my household finances. So it's a bit more positive when they think about their own finances, but still a lot of concerns. About two-thirds worried about the safety of their savings, another two-thirds the value of their investment. So there are big concerns, and even ability to pay your bills. We know the past few years have been rough from a cost of living standpoint. So Canadians, this is a moment in time where they're feeling a bit jittery. Add to this all this money coming in, and it's a moment of disruption. And that's how you need to think about everything we're going to be talking about today. So, Susan, can you dive a bit more into what it means for people and what they're telling us?
For sure, for sure. And I really appreciate you setting the context. And what I can now do is really go from that macro to the more micro. And and you'll be hearing this throughout our discussion today, is the word personal. So when we start at the start and really look to understand um, how Canadians view the concept of a legacy, the word legacy, it really is about love, kindness, the desire to leave something that is meaningful behind. So terribly personal to them. And right off the bat, that signals that we consider not treating this moment as either a larger version of the past or merely a financial transaction. We have to keep that personal, emotional element. What we also learn through our research is that many Canadians seem to be navigating this pivotal moment um, alone, on their own. We have roughly half without a financial advisor. We have about 4 in 10 without a financial strategy. So, that really signals that there's quite a bit of white space for relationship building. And when we talk about the personal, we know that by listening to Canadians through our research, that it really is also quite values driven. We have the majority of Canadian adults shared with us, so 8 in 10, that it is important to have their values reflected in the financial advice they receive. And so I would pause and ask myself, when I am having those conversations with a client or a prospect, when I'm developing various channels for sharing information, decision making, am I understanding their values today? And we will share
Hmm.
more around that. There's
Hmm.
also having that reflected in their financial strategy. Where we see getting this right mattering, and the amount of really active listening and knowing the right questions to ask to better know the Canadians out there, is that we currently have just over 4 in 10 who are at risk of churn from their primary financial institution. And that means that whether they are either actively considering or they are open to it, which means someone else's proposition, someone else's positioning, someone else's solutions could resonate with your
Hmm.
clients. And that's really, really critical to get the moments right that matter to
Hmm.
you.
No, exactly. And when at first I saw 87, 80%, I was thinking, well, maybe we're asking them if they like apple pie, which would be, when we have those kind of big results. But it actually has very deep and important meaning and very practical meaning for financial institutions, as you said, because if you're not part of this moment and if you're not talking to your clients in the right way or to prospective
Mhm.
clients in the right way, you're going to miss the boat on this. So this is about values. It's about having the right conversations. We need to have the right conversations with the right people. And that's where it's important to really understand who are we talking about? Who is going to inherit that amount of money and who is giving that money?
Absolutely. And, as we start really answering those questions, what is critical to start with is that there are profiles that are changing from the quote unquote traditional inheritor. So, for the first time in Canadian history, there is an expectation within the industry that women will hold the majority of wealth over the coming years. Now, this is mostly driven by longer life expectancy, also their position as both a primary and secondary inheritor. So,
Mhm.
through that longer life expectancy, inheriting from their partner or from their parents. And what we're seeing is that at this time, we have a third of Canadian women who expect to receive an inheritance, and half of them are saying that their financial decisions differ significantly from their parents. So, leaning in with what worked before might not work with women now. We're also seeing younger generations having already received an inheritance. And I'm talking about a third of Gen Z and a third of millennials sharing with us that they've already received an inheritance, and they exhibit a vulnerability in our data by virtue of being less likely to have an advisor or a financial strategy. And they shared with us that they are more likely to worry about monies that are gifted to them. So, again, when we consider who we're supporting, where on the continuum of wealth our focus lies, perhaps there's worth starting a little earlier and a little
Mhm.
farther to the left of that continuum. There's also a third profile to raise here, and that is BIPOC Canadians. And what we are learning in our research is that self-identified BIPOC Canadians are more likely to foresee an inheritance than are other Canadians. And so when we consider these together, these changes really are shaping a new kind of financial landscape, one that is more diverse, more values driven, more intentional.
hmm And that's really important because we're talking about now segments of society that will now receive and control a majority of wealth in Canada. And we know that those segments have also traditionally been segments that have either reported not being served as well, so feeling a bit underserved with the current offering, or not really feeling that they have the best communications with their service providers. So that's a very important finding.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what I'd like to do is go a little deeper into that. And what is really striking right off the bat is when, to your point about who is giving, who is receiving, we have 6 in 10 Canadians who shared with us that they expect to give an inheritance. And we have just over a third who expect to receive one.
And that's a big gap. And it's quite fascinating, especially when we think of the fact that we have an aging population. So a lot of people in the higher age groups, so this should almost be flipped in a way. So it tells us that we're not talking to each other.
Well, and that's exactly it, right? And why that gap, aside from just the nature of the gap, it also stood out because we learned through the research that many Canadians are very comfortable to talk about money and finances with their families. And yet, looking at these numbers, it strikes me that there are a lot of Canadians out there who may not be aware that they are in line for an inheritance. And what that does is it really risks their ability to plan. It also, from a sector perspective, risks the ability to support them in their planning. It also risks the ability to perhaps guide benefactors more, encouraging them to have the conversations, consider when and how these inheritances are gifted. Now, if we think back to the previously about the changing profile, look, we're going to focus a little bit on women here. So when we think about them on the receiving side, and this will be especially younger women, what we learn is they are searching for information online, but they're making their decisions in person. And then we ask them what they would do with a windfall. And nearly half said that they would invest a windfall. And yet, fewer than a third would seek advice. So they would invest it, but they're not as likely to be seeking advice for it. They're looking for information online, but merely making that decision in person. So again, opportunity for building relationships. On the other side of the paradigm here is the giving side. And we learn that most Canadians are planning to pass their wealth through a will, and they're doing it often to support someone's education or their career, or actually someone else's retirement goals. But many of these benefactors are quite independent. 1 in 5 would not seek advice from anyone. So again, the takeaway here brings us back to the relationship, but really it's about building that trust and relevance. And relevance is key here, building that early with both sides of this inheritance relationship. Now, yes, we looked at the changing profile, but I also want to take a bit of a familiar lens. And we're going to look at the different asset segments that I'm sure we're all quite familiar with, from mass market onto high net worth. What I'd like to do, instead of the more traditional focus on their asset, is looking at two dynamics as we looked across these groups. So first, where are we seeing greater representation of women? And the second dynamic will be what I'm coining as an inheritance loop. And that's basically when someone is experiencing essentially both sides of the transfer, the giving and the receiving, and often during overlapping stages. So women, they're showing up in mass market, particularly as millennials, and in the emerging high net worth. So in addition to other complexities that are at play, now we have women caught in two different asset classes, in needs will be different. So again, important to know that. But here's the thing about the women, regardless of the segment they fall in, they're still at a greater risk of churn from their primary FI. And
It's interesting to think about this in those loops because that's a concept that in itself is interesting. You receive and you give money possibly at the same time. So your outlook can be very different. But also what this tells us is those loops kind of the interplay with those segments means that in a way what we saw as a linear progression, that line is a bit broken up and
Mhm.
people can really shift rapidly from one to the other.
Absolutely. And the experiences they had with one part can absolutely influence their expectations and
Hmm.
decisions with the next. So there's a lot of experience management at play here as well. Now, as we've been talking a lot about today and that changing landscape and the current context, I'd also like to take a moment to look forward. And what we are seeing are about three major trends defining that next generation of Canadians. And here I'm focusing a little more on millennials and younger Gen X and how they think about wealth. So the first element, the first trend is the extent to which they shared with us that their decisions are diverging from those of their parents. So 6 in 10 Canadian adults say their financial decisions differ significantly from their parents. This actually increases to 2/3 amongst millennials. And while millennials' decisions might differ, and I want to really stress this for a moment, their goals in life aren't necessarily differing. So, in our youth study, in Leger's own youth study, we learned that millennials are aspiring or have already become homeowners, married, or parents. What we need to recognize is how they get there
Mhm.
is different. There's a second element, which is a bit of an increased importance on non-traditional assets. And that would be, what I mean by that is a shift away from the more traditional stocks, bonds, or cash equivalents. Now, currently, it's at about a quarter of Canadian adults, but of course, again, skews when we start looking across generations. And quite specifically, we're talking 4 in 10 millennials are more interested in non-traditional assets. And the third is coming back to the element of values and Canadians truly seeking alignment between their values and their money. And where we see that coming up is in the 55% who shared with us that they really want their values. They want socially responsible presence in their portfolios. That is one of the things that's quite important to them. And among women, that becomes even higher.
Mhm.
So, you know, as we're looking ahead, we really do need to recognize that the landscape today truly would be different and about from yesterday, that is really about being proactive and meeting emerging needs. So how can we do that? It's really about also understanding where they get their information, how they make their decisions. And the reason this is really important is, as you can see here, Canadians are looking for their financial information predominantly online and yet making their decisions in person. So, you know, I would look at that and really ask myself, what does that mean? Are we showing up? Because we want
Mhm.
to be part of that.
Yeah. And how do we so if I put myself in the shoes of a financial service provider, how do I
Mhm.
insert myself in this discussion? As you say, people they go online, they look for information, they talk to various people, but they make their decisions in person. How do we make sure that we have the proper conversation when they come to us, but also how do we drive them to come to us in person? So how do we insert ourselves in there?
Well, you know, in addition to what I was sharing around relationships and getting to know inheritors in particular for taking a forward looking perspective better, I did allude to the importance of relevance and really
Hmm.
making sure that we appear relevant. And, you know, I might start by asking myself that, you know, if our entire product suite is optimized for more efficient technology driven solutions, what are we doing to ensure that those efficiencies don't come at the expense of really key human elements of empathy, trust, and human connection? Because we also know when we think about virtual tools and we asked about virtual tools, quite open to a number of them, but the greatest receptivity is a virtual meeting, but with a person
Hmm.
versus AI, still receiving advice somehow from a human versus AI. So, what are we doing to ensure that human connection? That's what I would leave folks to think about.
Yeah. So loyalty, in a way, is not inherited. You need to earn it, right?
Oh, I love that.
Unintended.
Yeah, I love absolutely.
So thank you, Susan. As I mentioned at the beginning, like we were trying to get to be, short, give you a real snapshot. I hope the main message here is how do you insert yourself in that discussion? How do you make sure that you are listening correctly, that you are also paying attention, focusing on the right groups, make sure that you cover all the key segments of society as they go through these inheritance moments or sometimes these loops, as Susan has mentioned. So this gives you also a broader sense of what we're covering in the core study. So today we're just covering a small portion. You will also receive a free summary report. That's just a snapshot of what we've done. You will receive this as part of being registering for the webinar. But there's a lot more that we cover in our reporting more broadly. And of course, we cover all the traditional wealth segments, but we also look at, are you a newcomer to Canada? How long have you been here? Gender, region, age, which financial institution are you doing most of your banking with? So all this information is also available in the study. And of course, we'd be very happy to talk to you about what else we have to offer. So there is a report that we call our standard report, but it's a very hefty report that we would be happy for you to purchase to get more information on this whole study. And we can also create a customized report where we really tailor this to your needs and really focus on your specific business issues and how we can help you. And same in the same line of thought, we'd be very happy to workshop this with you, sit down with you and go through the findings and really try to have a kind of co-creation workshop where we talk about what this means for you. What does it mean for your organization? Where do you come in? How can you improve what you're doing? And we can also do this digitally. We do have our own internal digital agency, Leger Digital. We'd be happy to do a digital audit of what you're currently doing and how you're currently engaging your audiences. We have in-house creative and digital strategists who would be happy to go through this with you and help you really optimize your online strategy to make sure that you are really getting the most bang for your buck. So we would be really happy to talk about any and all of this with you. So please feel free to reach out. And we have a couple of minutes, so if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. I think I see something here in the Q&A. Of course, I need to go to it. Did we investigate much on living legacy, especially what is gifted for and how it's funded?
We did. So we have a really good understanding. I shared some of the high level ones about the reasons behind. We also absolutely look at, those who've already given an inheritance versus just those who intend. And then as well, we are able to identify individuals who plan to leave an inheritance outside of their will. So not once they are gone. So yes, we have quite a bit of learnings that we can
Mhm.
share in that.
Okay. And someone's asking, are we able to break down the 1 trillion in assets? Where does it come from? Where is it going? Real estate, stocks, etc.
Uh, Not to that level of granularity, to be honest. However, one of the things we do welcome is that conversation of what data you may have that you can share transactionally, safely, obviously, that we can then marry with our research to come up with the answers that you would need.
And someone's asking us, has legacy in terms of philanthropy been part of this study?
Yes, we do also as part of one of the reasons or the what they would do with the gifting we have captured charities and giving.
Thank you, Susan. I see where it's 12:30. We said half an hour, so we will stop here. I really, first of all, thank you so much, Susan, for doing this with me. It's been a pleasure, and I hope people learned as much from you as I did from you as we worked on this. And I also want to thank everybody who joined us. We will send you a summary report on this. We will send you the recording as well. and we'll be in touch. And please feel free to contact us for any more information and talk about what else we could do for you. Thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Sébastien.